G'day. The majority of my videos are shot with a camera on a tripod, and typically the sort of tripods that I can afford are made out of plastic. They're not all that sturdy. They could do with some improvement. So for some time I've been thinking about making up a camera mount, and I spotted a picture that looked like something I could make up. In making this, I used the XY table that I scraped in, so you would get to see that and how that actually works. I also do a little bit of work with splines and inserts and all that sort of fun stuff, as well as trying to save a bit of weight. So you'll see that I've pared off a bit of material where it's not needed. But this is the story of the camera mount. I'm starting out by doing the piece the camera's going to rest on, and this will be putting on a pivot. Now there's nothing really special about this. I've squared the block up, put my stud off the groove with a normal cutter, but I've switched here to a high helix specialty aluminium cutter. This was given to me by a friend of mine, Bob, over in Perth. Too big for his mill, but every so often, particularly when I'm doing deep pocketing in aluminium, it comes in really handy, and this is one of those occasions. I'm pocketing out the top so I can put a rubber pad in there. So what I've done is I've just come along and I'm using an end mill, and I've fed that in there. Now, strictly speaking, you're not meant to do that, or not meant to be able to do that. But there's a 2-degree fishtail on the, or 2-degree angle relief on the bottom of the cutter. And so what you can do is, if you wind along, you can't plunge, but if you wind along while slowly winding down, you can get down to your depth. So I've just done a bit of a zigzag to get down there, and then I've come along. I'm still 1/2 millimetre or so shy of where I want to be. I've done my usual trick of working out where the centre is and taking out the cutter diameter. So I'm going plus and minus a couple of dimensions there. And so I'll now come along and I'll just trim up those edges. This surface here doesn't matter too much. It's going to have as I said, a rubber or maybe even a cork pad glued to it, so that'll be fine. The reason I'm doing this now is that I won't be able to do it after I've shaped the sides, because the sides are going to have a rounded bottom on them and possibly a taper on the sides, and so it'll make it very difficult to hold. So this is happening now. Last thing I'll do before I take this out is just find that centre again and then pop a pilot hole through there, because that's where the screw is going to go. I've cleaned up the part a little bit since you last saw it. As I was doing before, I've put the pocket in there, I've put a hole in there, but then I've come along with a router cutter and just routed over the corner there, so that's very handy. I'm going to put this up on a rotary table next to put the radius on here. I may have to smooth that with a file, because it looks like I've overrun my scribe there by a smidge, but oh well, I'll have to live with that. And then I'll be doing some trick stuff. This is the method conventionally that's used to put radii in parts with rotary tables. You get the centre of the radius lined up with the axis of the rotary table, and then it's a matter of carefully cranking around and getting the fit. It's a pain, because what I normally find is as I tighten these clamps up, the point moves, and so you've got it's a bit of a balancing act. So if you have to do this a number of times, it's not much fun. But I've got another way which I'm going to try out. For those of you who are wondering why I spent all that effort on the XY table, this is the reason. What I've got is I've got the rotary table with the XY table bolted on top, and what that means is I can bolt something onto the top of this table, position the axis of the rotary table under at 0, 0, and then using the 2 slides here, adjust this so that the particular points I'm interested at are at that 0, 0 point. And so here I've got some sort of just some shaping that I want to do. I've almost run out of Z. This is actually a center punch I'm using here to position this. So I'm going to have to do something here. I also probably need to look at some better clamping, but as an experiment it's not too bad. And maybe I also need to look at some way of getting a lower profile rotary table. These were once upon a time made by a company called USA. They make batteries, but before even now they make some CNC equipment, but before they made CNC equipment, before CNC was common, they made things like this where there was an XY table on top of a rotary table for precisely this. So what it means is you can clamp that down, position to your individual centre points, do your milling, reposition to another one without having to worry about taking this off and jiggling it and all that sort of thing. Basically it's here, it's set, any movement is done by this. That's nearly all the trick stuff done. So these pockets were just basically to remove a bit of material and lighten it up, both from a physical point of view but also from an aesthetics point of view. That's the same flat I've got down there where I went in too deep, so I'm going to have to build that up or dress that back with a file or something like that. These pockets need a bit of work anyway because you've got a bit of tooling mark. So in there with the emery and the riffler files, but apart from that, this setup has worked quite well. Certainly much easier to dial things in. I need to find a better way of locating those centres, but apart from that, it's worked beautifully. I do need to think about how to get a lower profile rotary table, because this one I can do small work like this, but if you think about that, that's maybe 60 millimeters. I can't do much more than probably what I've got here, so I need to think about that one, but that's okay. Part of this is experimental and seeing what can be done. I did end up adding a block behind that, and that was mainly because this was nodding a little bit, and that seems to have just sort of stiffened things up a little bit. Nothing terribly exciting about that. I'm now up to making the part that fits inside for want of a better term, the clevis piece here. And I'm going to try a technique that I've read about and thought, I wonder how well that works for quite some time. Basically what you do is you drill a hole through a piece of material, run a rod through, and then you allow that rod to roll on your vise. And so that, in theory, should give me, with a constant cutter height, I should be able to get a hemispherical shape on that. Don't know how well it's going to work. I've drilled the hole as best as I can, in the right spot, and I reamed it and then put a piece of 5mm rod in there. If the hole's too loose, of course, you're going to get all sorts of movement there, so that probably won't work as well. So we'll try it and we'll see. That works surprisingly well, much better than I was expecting. Some of these ideas you read about and you think, well, in theory that should work, but in practice it may be a little bit iffy. But as you can see, I've got a sort of faceted hemispherical surface there, so I'll be able to run over that with a file very easily and clean that up. I think having a good reamed hole, fitting hole there helps, but certainly a technique to remember. Here are my two pieces. If you recall, I had a flat there. I didn't have the tangent quite right, so I built that up with a bit of weld. It only needed 1mm or so, and then I filed that back, and so I've now got my symmetric shape back. That one that had the faceted top on it, I've gone in and I've cleaned out some more material there. The reason for putting these sorts of pockets in and that sort of pocket is to try and save a little bit of weight. This is going to be on the end of a boom, and so I don't particularly want to have something that's heavier than it needs to be. I am thinking about putting some slots in here just to take a bit more material out of there. They of course go together like that, and if I've got this right, there we go. I mean, this is just a 5mm pilot hole, but that will then give me probably about 180 degrees worth of rotation. You can see here that this relief here is necessary so that I can get a screw in here and do up the screw to hold the camera. So that's why that was put in there, and that needs to clear all the way that way and that way. So that's that. Now I need to work out how I'm going to clamp that. There were two ways I was thinking of. One was putting a clamp bolt here and just having a pin on this side to give it a little bit of stability. Having a bolt going all the way through and clamping is not a terribly good way of doing things, because that's relatively thick, and so it's going to resist any great clamping forces. I pocketed out the underside of my camera stage by 4mm, I think it was, purely to save weight. However, I needed to leave a round boss in the middle there so that the captive screw had something to be captive with. So I've used this trick before, but some of you may not know about it. That's an annular cutter, and although it's got a little bit of a relief angle on it, that'll come in quite nicely, and if you only feed down to a particular depth, will give you a round boss like that. So I lined everything up on the center hole there, and plunged in with that to my depth, and then went around with a 3/8 cutter to clean up what was left. Bit of a progress report. I've made up some of the smaller parts. This knob came from the drill grinder. I think it was one of the parts that I wasn't going to use. It had an M8 nut in there, so I've taken that out. I found an M8 bolt and then turned that down and put an M6 thread on there. So that'll just pop in there like that, and that'll be part of the locking thing. I could have made a handle out of aluminium, but this is probably a bit lighter and I've had it on hand, so I may as well use it. I've put helicoils in both ends of the aluminium here. I never really like having a bare aluminium thread, particularly one that's going to be going in and out, and that's what this one here will be doing. So I've got those in there, and that didn't take very long to do. I've made up a captive nut for the camera, and that'll screw into the base piece here, so that's not a problem. On the base piece, I've reamed that out to a 6mm hole, so that will accommodate a shoulder bolt to hold on to one side. On the other side, and on this side, I've reamed that out to 1/2 inch. Now, because I don't like using aluminium as a bearing surface, what I've done is I've got some 1/2 inch brass bar. I've then put a coarse knurl on there, and what that'll do is act like a spline. So I'll now take that to the lathe, part that off, and then push that into there with some Loctite, and that should lock that brass piece into there, and then I can come along and I can glue it for the shoulder bolt, and it should all be fine. The shoulder bolt itself, I think I've had how to make one of these into a separate video, but it's basically a shoulder, and that will screw up against the face of this part like that, and that will allow this to pivot, and also a little bit of lateral movement. That's the result of the knurled bush being pushed into the aluminium. The hole was reamed to 1/2 inch. The bar stock was 1/2 inch before I put the straight knurl on, and that straight knurl then increased the diameter nominally by 0.5 of a millimetre, something like that. But because they're both nominally the same size, the material in the aluminium material was able to squeeze into the grooves in the bush, so it's locked it in. I've also got some Loctite there, and it's pretty solid. For those of you wondering, that groove there is just when I was cleaning this up. I ran the cutter the wrong way, so these things happen, unfortunately. It's a pity, but there you go. So that's that. I've now drilled that out and reamed that for the shoulder bolt, and that goes in there quite nicely and spins around. And here's the finished article. The top here I did go with cork. I got some wine bottle corks and glued them together, then took a slice out and put that on. I had to remake the bolt in there. What I found was that because I ran the thread on there with a die, I didn't get it quite concentric with the shaft here, so I went back and I single pointed all that, and that seems to work. The shoulder bolt's okay. I took a little bit off that because it was a bit excessive, the gap. It didn't need to be that much. I've got reasonable movement through there. It's a little tight in a couple of places, but I think that's probably because of I didn't probably take enough care getting the two threads here lined up square to the faces, so I may have to redo that, I may not. I'll just see how it goes. It might just sort of wear itself in. But anyway, there's a camera mount. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.